Those who walks out on first dates, what was your I'm out of here moment? Monpetit Vulcan 616 said. He invited me and a friend to play dodgeball with a group of folks I've never met. We're having an okay time. He's paying more attention to his friends, but that's fine because I've got my friend to keep me occupied. We're hanging out in the parking lot before the first game is about to start when out of nowhere he grabs a ball and throws it at my crotch as hard as he can. This motherfucker screams wham, bam, right in the clam. I immediately turn to my friend and ask her if she's ready to leave. I say goodbye to him and his friends. Immediately come home to a grip of texts about how immature I was behaving. Sternum Himmel said. Invited me to a bar which was apparently close to his apt, and kept wanting to snuggle at his apt with me. I left to a friend's party and met a man I've been with for 3+ years. The first guy later texted me a dick pic on Easter Sunday. Did said. On a first date with a military guy. He spent a large portion of the date talking about why the strippers in Toronto were better than the strippers where we lived. To change the topic, I asked him if he did any volunteer work with the military overseas and he said no. I joined the military to kill people, not help people. I got my bill, chugged my beer, and left as fast as I could. Kulturin said. This guy and I were eating dinner after chatting for a couple of weeks, and unprompted, in the middle of something I was saying, and completely unrelated to what was being discussed, he said something along the lines of, "So you know in order for this to work you're gonna have to share yourself, right? My friends and I like to pass girls around." I was pretty dumbfounded, and after a bit of stuttering I told him I didn't think it was going to work, asked for a to-go box in my portion of the check, and noped the fuck out of there. Max Gop said. We met at the restaurant. I had arrived first to get a table. The server showed her over. We shook hands. I pushed her chair in. The server asked if we would like a drink or to hear the specials. She picked up the menu, asked the server for a wine list without even looking at them, looked intently at me and said, "How much money do you make?" I said, "Excuse me?" in a confused tone, somewhat taken aback. She stared at me and said very slowly and deliberately, "How much money do you make in a year?" I looked over at the server, who was still standing there with a really awkward look on their face, thanked them for their assistance so far, turned to my date and said I was sorry but I had to leave, and I got up and walked out. Educational Owl 8 said. Went first for a walk. He did not shut up for a minute for 1 hour, complains about everything and everyone in his life, not even ask nor allow me to give a comment. Sat down, he orders food for me, without even asking, gets his drink, bartender mentions the caps are difficult to open, but he arrogantly and rudely brushes him off, tries to open them himself but ends up spilling juice all over himself. Yells like it was the staff's fault and how the country he is from is superior. No regard for people, just yelling. At that point, I wanted to get under the table because that was actually a restaurant I frequently visit, from a small town with just a handful of restaurants. Continues to talk about how superior and above all that incompetence he is, and when he becomes manager, he would fire people like that. Continues with complaints for another hour. I offered to split the check considering that he talked about money issues and because I obviously did not want to see him ever again, so did not want to feel like I owe him anything. He yells at me, I leave the money on the table, walk off. He basically continues yelling at stuff for going after check again with the in my country talk about how they have it on the spot. Grabs my hand and says angrily to wait for him. Asked me literally 2 questions finally. I say I will grab a taxi but he forcefully insists to walk me home. To avoid him making another scene, I accept. Educational Owl 8 said. We walk in silence. I try to have him off and leave. He insists to follow me home, how there are probably some dangerous people around. He tried to force himself on me on my front door, the one of the yard, fence or how it is called, even though I said I don't think it will work. Exact words, you owe it to me. We went on a date. I did not waste my money for nothing. I literally pushed him off. He was skinnier, and threw another $20, besides the ones I already left for my meal in the restaurant, at his face, saying here, we were done, got instantly in the yard, locked the fence, while hearing him yell, and sent him a text that I will call the police if he does not get the fuck out of there. He left. The worst part is, his aunt was her neighbor, my mom knew his mom and were good friends, and the next day, on my way out she literally had the audacity to ask how did it all went. I am pretty sure she heard him screaming awful things since literally, Their house is like 10 meters from mine, across the street, literally, and I told her just you should have raised him better. They never spoke to me again. I am absolutely fine with that. Internet poser said. He started making comments about my puss, then took me to his house to use the bathroom before the next part of our date. We had lunch first, then we're supposed to play mini golf. Didn't know he lived with his parents, so I had to meet them on the first fucking date. They were nice, but I felt so uncomfortable because I already knew this wasn't going to move beyond date number 1 thanks to his puss remarks. He told me to wait in his room while he went to the bathroom, and I noticed that his computer was on. Before our date he was chatting with a friend and he left it up on the screen. The last message he'd sent said, "I hope I get to see internet poser's tits, I bet they're so perky and small." The fuck? Why leave that up and send me in there to see it? I lied saying that my mom called with an emergency and needed me back home. Nope, the fuck out, and never spoke to him again. Retro Whiskers said. This is meeting someone from an online dating app. He turned up with pupils the size of dinner plates, and super erratic. He said he'd forgotten his wallet, so I got in the first round. We were on the way to the second pub to meet his mates so they could lend him some money. For the walk there he spoke absolute garbage nonsense non-stop, but ended with how he tried to drown his ex's chihuahuas in a pool. Near the pub he said he had to answer whoever was calling him on the phone. At this point we were 30 minutes into the date and already going to the next pub. He downed his drink in about 3 seconds. Whilst he stood there on the phone I said I would meet him at the pub. Everything was all in close proximity, but instead walks past it and ran all the way home. Seafoot said. Completely unrelated, but the pupils like dinner plates reminded me of a weird night I had when I was working in St. Louis one time. I had finished work for the day and had went out to a random bar near a hotel. I'm from Detroit, so no idea what the place was like. While I was sitting at the bar, chatting with the bartender and bouncer, some random drunk guy came in with friends and yelled, "Hey, I need to buy this guy a shot." He walks closer to me and followed it up with, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else. Still got the shot though." Half an hour later a 6 feet 6 inches, jacked drug dealer walked in and hugged me from behind, lifting me out of my chair saying, "You want a shot?" I turned around and he said, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else. Still got the shot." About 20 minutes later one of the drug dealer's companions was fishing her hand around my crotch, so I picked it up and removed it asking, "Can I help you find something?" She turned to me with dinner plates for pupils and said, "Oh, I thought you were somebody else." I never found out who that somebody else was, but he seemed to be living a fun life. Mr. Unavailable said. When I realized she was trying to get her ex get jealous of me. She chose the place and time and it was where her ex worked at that time. Left and apologized to the ex. Later she texted me saying that she'd forgive me for the faux pas if went to another date she still picked the same time and place. I ghosted her. Gibbars Boy said. Not me, but this happened to a friend. Context: friend has a beard. So my friend picks up this girl and they're on their way to dinner and she says, "You do realize that if this is gonna work you have to shave that off, right?" He didn't say anything, just turned around and dropped her back off at her house. At work said. Had a first date with a girl who insisted we go to a really expensive place, where she ordered a $25 appetizer, $45 steak and a $15 drink. She wouldn't put down her phone, kept taking calls and answering texts. The waitress noticed and motioned for me from behind her. I excused myself, and the waitress had separate bills all made up and asked if I wanted to pay my share and leave her at the table. I said, that would be wonderful. So I did. Kalopsha Suffering said. He was a friend of a friend. He went to a restaurant and ordered our food. While we waited he started to say things like, "First I'll eat this meal then I'll eat you out." I laughed cause I thought he's just joking. I thought he's just nervous and his mouth lost his filter. Then when the waitress later asked if we want more to drink he was like, "Yes, bring us something strong." I said not for me and that I have to drive later and just want a Coke, and he looked at me and was like, "Don't be stupid. You think I'll fuck you once and let you leave? You'll at least stay the night." The waitress looked at me with wide eyes like I'm crazy for even being there. After she left I told him that he has to stop with this, that it was rude and that we're on our first date. He apologized and for 10 minutes it was okay. Then, as if a switch was turned on, he said just like that, mid-sentence without even ending his previous story, "You know what? I can't control myself anymore. Either we go now or I'll fuck you on this table. I told him I'll go to the bathroom. He complained like a baby that we have to go now. I went anyway and went to the waitress, paid for the food and left without a word. Dude said. A few years ago I met a girl on a dating app where we matched and agreed to meet at a bar night of. I went to the bar right after getting out of work, and waited for her inside. Got a few I'm getting ready, about to head out type of texts, and was feeling impatient, so thought I'd give her the benefit of the doubt and wait. About an hour after initially arriving, she sends me a picture of me inside the bar saying she's there with friends. I go to where she took the picture from, and she wasn't there. I waited around for another 10-15 minutes, still haven't met her. Said fuck it, texted her telling her I've waited too long, and frankly it was weird she snapped a photo instead of coming to say hi, and I was going home. She seemed confused on how I could feel disrespected. I offered to meet her another day, and she responded disinterested, so no make update. Darabrain said. It seemed to be going alright for a while. We meet late afternoon and went for a stroll around town doing a little bit of a pub crawl with a drink at each followed by some food at a monthly food truck festival I knew about which was going to be followed by a local bar and dancing. I kept seeing the same guy at all the locations obviously following us. On a toilet break I mentioned something to one of the pub doormen who asked him to leave politely although that got a little heated. She ran over to the doorman and explained that it was her husband. They had a thing of watching each other go out with someone and maybe watching them have sex. I did drop in a question if they had ever done more like stealing from someone and she accidentally said it had happened, but only a couple of times before trying to say that she didn't mean that. I left them with the doorman and reported them to the police. Fitzree said. I went on a date with another dude who suggested a coffee shop as the date. Which was perfect cause who doesn't love coffee. Anyway I get there early. Order myself a coffee and a waffle. He comes in, sits down and introduces himself. Some time passes by and I ask him, "Aren't you gonna order anything?" He responds with, "No, I don't like coffee." And that was a red flag cause he suggested a coffee shop knowing that they have coffee. He then proceeds to watch me eat and drink which made me uncomfortable. Anyways we go back into his car because he was also my ride home. Where we talk about our interests. Where this man tells me I believe that sheer will and determination can cure anything. I'm a nursing major and I was like oh no when he said that, but I wanted to test that and see how far that went. So I ask him, what about cancer? Do you believe that can be cured with sheer will and determination? He's like yeah, and I ask him, what about chemotherapy? I don't believe in chemotherapy. Fitzree said. Not only that but he then tried to tell me that HIV was also curable. But I legit worked in a Planned Parenthood for about 2 years, and I have to inform this guy that it isn't curable but it is treatable. Then he drops the biggest surprise on me. He tells me that he has HSV1 which if you don't know is herpes. And then he tries to kiss me. Besides the shitty date, I preferred if he told me his health status beforehand cause that was a deal breaker for me both alongside and without everything that transpired. Safe to say he dropped me off and I deleted his info and never contacted him again. Team JJ88 said. Met her online. She told me she had one kid, baby daddy is long gone. During dinner at a very expensive restaurant, think 5-star $100 per plate. She started ordering a lot of food. I stopped her and said there is no way you're going to be able to eat all that tonight. She said that it was for her 3 kids that are in the car. I asked the waitress to give us a few minutes. We got into a big argument. She said I had to feed her kids too. That they needed to be fed before dropping them off at their father's house. I asked her why she lied, about how many kids she had and baby daddy not being long gone. She said that if I knew the truth then I probably wouldn't have gone out with her. I said you're absolutely right, and walked out. Cat Ninetail said. He brought 3 friends along which was unexpected. They were all drunk. I flagged down a waitress while one guy left to go do something. I ordered my food. The other 2 confessed they'd already eaten. Third guy walks back into the restaurant, dripping blood from a horrific gash in his arm. In shock, I ran to my car and grabbed my first aid kit, cleaned and butterflied the wound, bandaged it, had the guy elevate his arm while the waitress called 911. Got cleaned up, returned to find the uninjured guys had just eaten my food. Grabbed my kit and my purse and walked out. Lecha Hamanchi said. I drove us. Started to parallel park, been working parking in SF for years by then, and he said, "I'll park this for you." Women don't do well at parallel parking. At dinner he was dismissive only to female waitstaff. I ran into these two hilariously drunk surfer dudes on my way from the bathroom. They told me my date was a jerk. We laughed about it and I went back to my table. When leaving, the drunk dudes were also outside. I said bye to them and the Charlio had the nerve to bark, "She's with me." I told him to wait while I got in the car and unlocked the doors, except I didn't. I drove off and left him standing there. The two drunk dudes hooped and yelled, "Go, lady, go." Such an awesome finish to a terribly embarrassing date. Neat Possibility 889 said. He insisted on meeting me at a bar I was already at with some friends, was rude to them and made me go sit alone with him. Asked me to go for a walk with him. We walks across the street. That's where his house was. We put on a movie and he laid on the couch, started kicking at my legs playfully. I was sitting on the opposite side of the couch, and said, in a bitchy tone, "You're just gonna watch this movie when you're alone in a room with a boy." Boy? We were like 27. I said I was gonna go. He got real upset and made me walk myself out. Haha. Visler Terlau said. Hadn't even met the guy yet. We were still chatting online to set up the first date. We were going to be busy at different times that weekend, but I was interested and sincerely offered to meet a week later instead. He proceeded to get drunk by himself and sent a ton of said messages about how he couldn't get the date and he was unattractive and I was totally gonna bail on him. Which wasn't the plan before, but it certainly was now. Fursher4 said. He did a racist impression of his Asian professor while we were having dinner in a Vietnamese restaurant. He picked me up and drove those so I didn't leave on the spot. When we got in his car after dinner he asked if I wanted to go back to his place. I made up an excuse as to why I couldn't. He made 2 calls on Bluetooth to hang out with other people while I was still in the car. It wasn't even while driving back, the car was still in park. People Prinxis said. Was meeting up with a guy I met through a dating app at the beach. We both arrived and texted each other we were there. I asked him where he parked and he was trying to explain where, but I figured it would be easier to just both get out of our cars and walk down to the beach together. He keeps asking me to come to his car and I keep telling him he needs to get out of the car. I don't know where he is. Eventually I give up and just walks down to the beach alone. BC, I'm already there, might as well enjoy the beach. Dude texts me again and is surprised I went down to the beach without him instead of waiting half an hour for him to get out of his car. He eventually comes down to the beach and joins me. This wasn't the end of the childish behavior, unfortunately. For context, I have very thick curly hair and don't like people touching my hair, and this guy keeps touching my hair after me repeatedly telling him not to, then he pulls my hair. Like a child in preschool. I left after he did this a few times after I kept telling him to stop. In retrospect, I really wish I had just yanked his hair right back and left right then. Tried to hit me up asking for a second date, but unsurprisingly I declined. Funny enough, a few weeks later I started seeing a guy who lived in the same area as guy number 1, and saw him while walking on the pier with the other guy. Pistol Pato said. She claimed she could see angels in 3 different colors, and mentioned how one time a girl that was covered in dark scales and red glowing streaks between the scales came to her in the middle of the night and crawled to her bed. She claimed she placed her hand on the girl and an evil spirit left her. She then said that while I was in the bathroom, an angel came to her and told her when I would die, what age, and how. I told her I'd be right back and that I left something in the bathroom. I left the place outright, completely creeped out and wondering WTF kind of person she was and what strange stuff she is getting into. Zatanna78 said. Was talking to a guy who was a maths professor, invited me on a date to an outdoor play where he was playing an important role. I show up to see it's a church picnic and he was playing the devil. Introduced me to his family and all they talked about was Weird Al music. They didn't listen to anything but Weird Al. Then his sister got on a loud tangent about why I went to a private school since unknown as to me he had told them everything about me in every conversation we had. Faked an emergency to get out of there. He wanted to take me to the state fair for a second date with his whole family. Knowledge Historical 8 said. She wouldn't stop making fun of me. She was 26 and I was 36, though if it matters, we were at the same place in our careers income, and she kept making ageist jokes about how I was old and decrepit. Eventually, after telling her pretty directly to lay off, I just said, you know, I'm not enjoying this, I'm going to go, and paid for the table and left. Later she said it was because she was overcompensating because she was self-conscious about how much younger she was, but that just means that when she's uncomfortable she goes straight to demeaning the other person. Kiwi Chef said, blind date set up by my grandparents. I love my granddad and he's done so much for me, so I went. We met at a bar where my best friend worked. We get drinks and I'm talking to my friend. He says, this homo trying to hook up with you. 1. He's not gay. 2. It wouldn't matter if he was 3. He was just checking in on me. So I'm already done with him at this point, but my ride is still over an hour away. His mate shows up at one point and starts trying to flirt with me. It was gross. My date then starts asking about my hot friends and if I can get them to come out. I said I like my friends, so no, he starts being racist against Pacific Islanders. And was horribly rude to this German guy there drinking. When my ride gets there I said I'm leaving. He said, I've got a big dick. You should come home with me. I said thanks, but I'd rather gouge out my eyes. The next day he messaged me and said, you probably think I'm a bit of a CT after last night, but do you want to go out again? I had no intentions of ever seeing him again, so I explained why his behavior was unacceptable and suggested he try making friends who are girls so he sees them as something other than a hole to stick his dick in. I told my grandparents everything. They told his parents and apparently his dad was super embarrassed. My grandparents were then informed to stay out of my love life, and anytime they brought it up I just say I've got a big dick. You should come home with me. Norman Beats said, I work in fine dining. A friend of mine showed up to my restaurant on a first date with the guy who arrived drunk as a fucking skunk. She's an absolutely beautiful, hilarious woman with a great career, truly a catch. Friday night, full restaurant, their table in the middle of the floor where everyone could see. He continued to burn through 3 bottles of wine, started making some bad jokes about her looking loose. She suggested he stop drinking. He reached across the table and slapped her. We all ushered her out. A bunch of men at other tables were about to beat his ass, but we held them back until he paid his bill. He didn't have enough money, said he was planning on making her split a $300 tab with him. We called the cops. Bye, Patrick. Another time, I helped a woman sneak out the back of a restaurant after eavesdropping on her horrible date. Their table was right by the service station. He had spent the entirety of the date complaining about his ex-girlfriend's eating disorder. From the minute they sat down and ordered drinks. Oh wow, you're having wine? That's so refreshing. My ex was fucking anorexic, she had to count calories of fucking everything. Blah 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 etc etc. The dude never stopped. Woman dipped out in between first and second course.